Tell you.
Oh, you know what? I mean, Mike Vrabel, I don't know if he's in the audience, but one thing that is popping up around every team is that with the pro scouts not going out to preseason games of opponents that are on their team schedules like they normally would, a lot of those pro scouts have been monitoring Twitter and other forms of social media heavily to try to get a grasp in terms of what's going on in the camps of teams that they're playing. So odds are, guys, there's probably some people maybe with burner accounts, maybe just with pseudonyms, connected with the Titans, connected with the Steelers and the Bucks, who are following our accounts right now. So it might not be Mike Vrabel or Mike Tomlin or Bruce Arians, but it might be someone in their midst watching this show. Just saying.
Well, I'm not afraid to. I'm not afraid to spill the beans, guys. Cortland Sutton's good. The Broncos defense is good. And Von Miller's playing on fire. So there you go. Just spilled all the beans.
There you go. Yeah. It was another practice where if you're hoping for an offensive breakout, you didn't see it. This defense has kind of gotten hot, and the offense is in a little bit of a rut. And just in the same way that this happens in a season, or as we're seeing in a series right now with the Nuggets, one side can get hot, the other side go into a little bit of a rut, and I think that's what's happening out there. The defense is just feeling themselves. They're playing with a ton of confidence, and I don't think the offensive confidence is shaken, but I do think there's enough of a gap between the quality of the offense and the quality of the defense that when the defense is rolling, it's going to be really hard for this offense day in, day out. So, we talked about the safeties yesterday, guys, and we gave them an A grade and said, these guys have just been so consistent throughout camp, and that was extremely evident today. Justin Simmons had an interception. I think I can say that. And, just the way that those guys play back there, Justin Simmons and Kareem Jackson, at the back of the defense just gives you so much confidence about what this defense can be. The way that they just control things from that back end makes you feel really comfortable on any given play. And they showed it today. Both of those guys made big plays throughout practice. And as much as we've talked about it, every time I watch those guys, I keyed in on them today after we said they've been so consistent that we didn't even know if one of them had made a mistake all camp. I was like, maybe that was too high of praise. I'm going to key in on these guys a little bit more to see if I can catch them slipping in one way or another. And it did not happen. Those guys are on point, play in and play out.
Yeah, and it's like Vic Fangio said after practice, there's not a huge room for Justin Simmons to grow. He's kind of hit all of the major milestones. It's just little things that he needs to improve on. And Vic said he expects him to hit all of those little things being in year 2 of this defense. Exactly.
And Justin, man, in the year 2 of this defense, that's when a lot of players really start to succeed and excel with this defense. And I think there's going to be some people that might be kicking themselves around these parts where I'm sitting right now by the end of this season because, his second team All-Pro last year, obviously Derwin James out of the conversation in the safety group now. He might be first team All-Pro this year.
So if he does that and he does what Vic Fangio expects him to do, which is play better in this scheme, and we see that Budda Baker is a $14.75 million per year safety, what's the price tag on Justin Simmons in 8 months?
Over 15, which is what what I said they should have just paid him and gotten it over with in the first place. But, I guess they probably could have gotten him in the 14s if they acted a little bit quicker. The question is it going to be here? Because, we've talked about this before. If the Broncos loved Justin Simmons, keyword love, they would have signed him up. And I feel like they were lukewarm on it. They wanted to go on a couple more dates. And I don't know. There might be someone out there who is ready to buy the ring.
Yeah, and Justin Simmons may do something this year that changes that like to a love. That could happen, and then the Broncos could say, all right, we're willing to hand over $15-16 million this year. But if the Broncos stay with where they're at, why would they go from not wanting to pay $14 million to wanting to pay $15-16 million? Because guys, what could happen in the next couple of months and right after the season is more safeties could just start resetting the market as well. And then if the Broncos hang back like they did or with Justin the first time, it's only going to be more.
And don't forget, they have the option of the second franchise tag, which even though it takes him up, that still will have him below $14 million for 2021 if they use that. The problem is you run the risk of creating some animus and frustration. Now, Justin Simmons, he's the type of guy that he'll go out and play, and he'll play well. I think it would probably be kind of like the situation Carolina faced with Julius Peppers 11 years ago when he got the second franchise tag and he went out and played and he had a good season. But that's the type of people that they are. But then after that, he was out the door and off to Chicago and lickety split. And so that's the one thing. You could give him that second tag and he could play on it, but then you're basically saying, all right, he's going to wave goodbye, because I can't see a situation where a guy gets a second franchise tag and chooses to come back a year later, unless it's a DeMarcus Lawrence type situation where you give him the second tag and a month later you work out a deal. That's what you'd be hoping for.
Well, and we got Jody chiming in saying Kareem Jackson will be gone after this year. That's how they will sign Justin Simmons. And that could be the case because they're not on the hook for Kareem in 2021, but they could keep Kareem for one more season and he'd be cheap compared to what the safety market is now. So right now, if Kareem plays anywhere like he did last year, I don't see them moving on from Kareem in order to pay Justin Simmons so much more.
Yeah, I agree. And to be honest, I think Kareem is going to play better than he did last year. He's probably the most confident player on the defense, it looks like, out there every day. He's obviously the one talking and jawing and yelling, and Vaughn, fits that mold too. He's extremely confident. Oh man, I just have to share this. They were doing a little like one-on-one blocking drill of tight ends and running backs, having to either block an edge rusher or pick up a blitzing linebacker. And, without giving too many specifics, Von Miller, these tight ends trying to block him was just like not fair. A couple of them didn't even get a finger on him. One move and gone. I was just like, this is not right. These guys, this isn't fair to these guys.
Is that Vic Fangio's sense of humor coming out? Is that what he'll watch later when he wants a good laugh?
Maybe. I mean, it was tough going out there, but there were some other really good battles. I was impressed with Noah Fant. Something about blocking kind of reminds me of special teams for these guys, which just like, it's all about will. It's all about want to. It's all about, really just wanting to dig your nose in there. And Noah Fant impressed me with his desire to make some plays out there. And so did Albert Okwuegbunam. He really, he's not quite gifted in that area yet, but it wasn't for a lack of effort. And then, of course, Philip Lindsay, the king of just, embracing the fact that he gets to pop someone out there.
Well, the whole thing of being a willing blocker, that's what you want to see with Alberto, because technically he's not there and he's not close. But kind of like Philip Lindsay, we saw when he first came in that he was willing to put his body in there even when he didn't have proper position and at least be an obstruction. So I think Albert O can have the necessary growth. I mean, we've seen growth in Noah Fant as a blocker from last year to this year, and it started with him being willing. And that's the key thing. We're not talking about Julius Thomas 2.0 here when it comes to blocking.
So really quick, with Alberto, if you are 6'5", 258 pounds, and you are a willing blocker, why would you not be able to at least turn into a good blocker? I understand it may take a year or two, but there really shouldn't be concern if the will is there, right?
There's nothing stopping him from being a capable blocker, except for maybe the fact that he's a little wiry. Not a big base, not a very wide guy. Speaking of wide guys, Andrew Beck has embraced the fullback life. I think he has thickened up a bit. But Alberto, I think that's one place where he could really improve, is just getting bigger, getting stronger. That might be one thing, but it's the same thing as Noah Fant. Noah Fant is also a very capable blocker. He has all the physical tools. He's strong. He's fleet of foot, and he's a lot wider than Alberto. You see that with him. He's learning, and we talked about it going all the way back to when he was drafted, he didn't get enough credit for how good of a blocker he actually was in college, and he's just gotten better. So that's nice to see. And while we're talking, in the on the DNVR Nuggets podcast, they call this male form corner. While we're talking about form, Derek Tuska, man, I think that he is a guy who completely gets it. And I think he has a chance to be a good player, but he's certainly physically outmatched when he goes up against any of these offensive linemen. So, it could be a situation for him where he needs to get in the weight room for a year before he makes plays on Sundays. And that's okay, for a late round draft pick like that. But I'm impressed with his understanding of his position. And I think, he's learning a lot from the guys around him. But he definitely needs to bulk up a little bit before he's playing in the NFL.
Back in the day, they used to call the practice squad the developmental squad. Before that was the taxi squad. But developmental, I think, is apt for Derek Tuska. He's got to get in the weight room. He needs that kind of red shirt year, as it will, to kind of learn and grow. I love what you said about Andrew Beck, though, embracing the fullback life. When you look at these tight ends, there is no way Andrew Beck was making this 53-man roster as only a tight end, because he just doesn't match up skill-wise only as a tight end compared to Alberto, Nick Vanette, even like Troy Fumagalli, Jake Butt with coming off the knee injury. Fullback and being versatile and having a special teams role, that's still his path to the roster. And even though it looks really tight at really tight at that tight end position, pardon the pun, it wouldn't surprise me if he makes the team. That being said, the Broncos, I think, may try to figure out, okay, roster-wise, do we have other options at fullback just in case we can't squeeze Andrew Beck onto the 53?
Well, and that's a question coming in from me, 6854, saying, is Andrew Beck that good at fullback? Can we put anyone back there? And when training camp started, guys, we all thought Andrew Beck was making this team. Of course, he missed the first couple of practices, but now he's been back. And do you think that there's a role for him still? Because we haven't talked about him really at all.
I do. I do. And it is because of that fullback position. Now, that's the first part of it. But the other part is him being a guy who's trusted on special teams. That's very important. And just the fact that he brings, a different aspect to that tight end room. Now, if you're a decision maker for the Broncos and you're saying, look, we think, Jake Butt can make 6 to 8 plays for us a game, whereas Andrew Beck might be able to make 1 or 2, well, then, yeah, you should make that decision. But I do think there's a part of them that wants to be able to use Andrew Beck in the backfield, and I don't think he's that much of a downgrade at the position where you're losing something that's so good just to have a fullback for a few plays a game. If they believe that, it's a totally understandable decision because you don't really need a fullback. But I think, it's almost a tiebreaker, or maybe even bumps it from a little behind to a tiebreaker for him to be able to have not only just the fullback skills, but also be a very reliable player on special teams.
Yeah, and that's the key thing. I think Tom McMahon, he's going to step in and decide a few of those spots at the back end of the roster based on special teams needs. And the other thing that's just hovering over this is when you don't have games, you lose the reps that really generate some separation for those back of the roster spots where their primary role on game days is going to be on special teams. So this may mean that you try to slip some guys to the practice squad that are rookies that are either late in the draft or undrafted that might otherwise have a crack, because you're going to want guys that have done it for you before. And Andrew Beck last year did it for Tom McMahon. And that's why when I get my 53, Andrew Beck still finds a way onto this roster.
Yeah, I think it's because Tom is going to say Andrew Beck's my man, and so keep him on this team, and that's how he's going to make it, I think. But guys, who does he take where does he fill in at the roster? Because is it technically under tight end, or could it be under running back?
I think you're going to keep 3 running backs, and so that opens up the door for Andrew Beck to fit into both categories. Normally you would have kept 3 running backs and Jano. Now you're keeping 3 running backs and Beck gets to play both sides.
Yeah, the other thing that's that is also in play there is how many quarterbacks do you keep on the 53? Do you go with only 2 and try to get Brett Rippon to the practice squad? Or do you say we might lose him on waivers and we really want to have a third guy who knows our scheme, especially with COVID being around? And what if you have an outbreak in the quarterback room and you need to keep one guy separate? Then does Brett Rippon stick on the 53? So if you keep 2 quarterbacks, you can go 2 quarterbacks, 3 running backs. That's 5. You figure 9 offensive linemen. That's 14, and then that gives you 11 guys that are coming from the tight end and receiver core. So that would actually give you a window to keep 6 receivers and 5 tight ends if you really wanted to.
Yeah, and another question from Jody here is a good one. Didn't Jano bring all that we're talking about with Beck, but just did it better? Everything that we're talking about other than catching the football.
Yeah, everything but tight end. That's kind of the key thing there. And I think we're only going to see the fullback out there in short yardage and goal line. So we're not going to see a fullback on 1st and 10 anymore. That's gone by the wayside. So someone who could be a tight end and could be an H-back is of more value to Pat Shurmur, whereas a guy who's a fullback like Jano is of greater value to Rich Gangarello, to Kevin Stefanski, who worked for Gary Kubiak last year in Minnesota.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we got another one here from me 6854. If we only had 22 Becks, we'd be all right. 22 Becks sounds like a Friday night for Andrew Mason, just pouring back Becks.
But you got to say it right, though. You got to say it right, though. You got to say, all right. You got to have that little huskiness in your voice and the little bit of that breathless quality that Brock Olivo, almost said Brock Osweiler, Brock Olivo had when he was up there and was clearly taken in, enraptured by Jano. Love Jano.
Man, it would be great if Tom McMahon, just for comedy purposes, had that exact line, but for Beck.
Well, maybe next time he talks, I'll ask him specifically about Andrew Beck and see what we can get out of him.
Hey, would you say that Andrew Beck, if you had 22 of them, you'd be all right?
The only problem with that is because on the Zoom conference, they mute everybody else. That
you wouldn't get the laugh.
Right. That's when I would be saying it not so much for Tom McMahon, but for everybody else in the media corps who would get that joke.
How about you ask, if you had unlimited, how many Andrew Becks would you want on the roster?
At least, you know what? Maybe at least as many as you get in the 15-can Breck sampler.
Yes.
About that.
15 Brecks.
Yeah.
That's what you need.
So Ryan, I know you can't tell us, who was the starting right tackle and who was the center, but I think yesterday Vic Fangio didn't specifically name a center, but it seems very clear from information we had up until yesterday. We can base our decisions on that. And it really seems like this is Lloyd Cushenberry's job. I guess maybe they want the element of surprise for the Titans to not know who that is. Do you guys agree that it's his job? They're just playing some games. And then what about at right tackle?
Yeah, it's his job, and John 787638475 who follows Zac Stevens on Twitter is probably happily reporting that back to the Titans staff. But yeah, it's Cush's job, as expected from the second that they drafted him. We knew that was going to be the most likely scenario. And you want that battery of Cushenberry and Locke to be together for a long time, and there's no reason to waste any time with that. As for right tackle, it still looks like it's going one way very heavily, but maybe not completely over is what I'll say to try and give you a hint as what we saw out here today. But it does, keep going back to what Vic Fangio said about it's Elijah's job as long as he plays the way we're capable of, and I just scratching my head as to what they think he's capable of.
Yeah, I wonder if this is going to be a decision where they would have in a normal year they would have made it based on preseason gameplay, but that they're just simply going to kick this to the regular season and see how he does in those games, and know that DeMar Dotson, being the experienced veteran that he is, could presumably step in at a moment's notice. Like, for example, if you're in Pittsburgh in week 2 and TJ Watt is making mincemeat of Elijah Wilkinson, then you say, okay, DeMar, get in there. We need you now.
This is so amazing, this comment right here.
That is great.
Oh, man.
So good.
John Bate,
shout out John
88,
Bate.
88, 28, 08.
Oh,
That's like John and Kate plus 8.
Oh, boy, plus
Well-
some more.
that's 8 digits right there.
Yeah, that's in the tens of millions. All right. What else you guys want to know? I'll see what I can give you.
Oh, boy. How did Drew look? Is it pretty obvious from saying that the defense had their way?
Yeah, man, it was tough going for him out there today. Some of the throws that I've seen him make throughout camp just weren't there. I'm trying not to break any rules here. He had a couple plays where I thought he was about to make the play that he's been making, and then there's just a hand comes out of nowhere and bats the pass down, and it was, I think it was just a frustrating practice in that regard for him, and because he kept on, being in a position to make plays. On a couple reads, he was just a little late, and so the play didn't get as much as it could have. So I wouldn't say he looked bad. It was just one of those things where it was like, we talk about Drew being able to make tight window throws, and it's one of the best qualities that he has, and one of the qualities that you absolutely have to have if you're going to succeed as an NFL quarterback. But today, those windows, they shrunk just a little bit, and sometimes there isn't a window, and I think that's what you saw today. Is just the defense was all over the place. They were really rangy, and those tight windows just they closed when he was trying to make those plays, and it was just kind of frustrating in that regard.
Okay, let me ask you this then, and I think this is a question all three of us could tackle. The defense doing this well, do you think there's a point where it starts to affect Drew Lock's confidence?
Nope.
No.
Drew Lock's confident. Cortland Sutton today was talking about Jamal Murray and just saying, he's so confident to make the big plays and the big moments. And I think that's, something that Drew Lock is going to have when he kind of fully matures into his role as a starting quarterback of this team. He doesn't strike me as a guy who gets his confidence shaken. If you remember all the way back to the Hall of Fame game, he had a bad game. And I remember, I just wasn't sure what to expect from him in the locker room. And he was like, guys, this is the first time I've ever been on an NFL field. Like, it's fine. I'm fine. I'm going to make adjustments and be better next week. And hell, he was right. He went out there and he was better the next week. So he just doesn't, he's not a guy who gets his confidence shaken in that way, I don't think.
Yeah, it reminds me of something that Vic said last year when talking about, should you play a quarterback too early? Should you wait, let him develop? And Vic said, if the guy's got it, he's got it. And I don't think going up against a great defense in training camp, getting beat pretty much for an entire week straight now, like the offense has been, I don't think that's going to ruin Drew Lock by any means. And if there's one thing we know about Drew, it's that he is very confident in himself. So I don't think that will change.
Okay, yeah, I generally feel the same way. I'll just say this though. I mean, the NFL, it's a different animal, and there's a long list of guys who were confident at every level of football, and then the NFL revealed something different. I think Drew Lock's going to be fine on the other side. But at the same time, that confidence, it's got to sustain itself potentially long-term, because this year may not be everything that the people who have high ceiling expectations for Drew Lock this year. It might not be everything that people expect. This could be more of a 2-year process, and and that's why I think John Elway talked about tempering expectations for the offense. Even Drew Lock, people need to buckle in for this ride to maybe take a little bit.
Yeah, no, it's true, and I said it on Saturday. I just, I don't want to start building in excuses for the offense, but I do think what you're saying is fair. Drew Lock does have a really high ceiling. I'm completely confident in that. But if you're expecting him to reach that ceiling in week 1, you're expecting a bit too much.
Yeah.
So this offense does have a lot of things that put it behind the 8 ball in terms of its youth, in terms of some injuries, in terms of just the lack of live reps that they're going to have together before they go out there in week 1. But I will say this, and this is my last big point here. It's now been mentioned twice, and it was Courtland Sutton who said it today, and I think this is something you can hang your hat on if you're looking for confidence in the offense going into week 1. Courtland just talked about how they're trying so much out here. They're trying everything. They're trying to install everything. They're trying each personnel group against certain defenses. And he said, that might make it look like we're a little more off, but once week 1 comes around, we're going to know what our go-tos are and what we're comfortable with and what we're really confident in. And so, again, it might be a little bit of spin zone because Courtland, probably hates the fact that the defense has had their number for the last few days of camp here and a good amount of the time throughout camp. But I think it's also true. Every day there are plays that they make and plays that look great against this defense. And every time that happens, Pat Shurmur files that away and says, okay, that's something that we execute really well that we can go to. So it might be a pretty pared down offensive playbook as they go into that week 1 series, that week 1 game against the Titans, but it might be the play, it might be their best plays. And that's what basically Courtland is saying. And if you're looking for a silver lining, that would be it.
I get that. And I think there's merit to that, but I also wonder if maybe the better philosophy for the last few weeks, instead of saying, let's throw the entire playbook out there, let's try to install it and then figure out our strengths. What if I wish that they had kind of tried to work on core concepts and strengths and get those right now, and then over the course of the year kind of build out from there? You know what I'm saying? Kind of start with that core. And frankly, based on what you had coming back and what you brought in, I think it's pretty easy to figure out what the core competencies, at least right away, should be. I mean, Phillip Lindsay and Melvin Gordon, getting those guys outside from time to time, but also taking advantage of some draw plays, getting a play action game going and complementing that run game with some shots over the top, and then the screen game, and kind of maybe focus there instead of trying to do everything. Focus on the things that your talent says you should do best, and then week after week introduce more concepts. And that also sort of helps you out, because then teams going forward don't quite know what to expect because you've got a wrinkle or two coming every week.
Yeah, Mace, I agree with you and totally know what you're saying about maybe in training camp, the Broncos should have taken a different approach, but it's the NFL. Things don't change. If one coach has been doing something for so many years, then that's the way they're going to do it. Vic's been in this business way too long. So, and they get 1 week of turnaround. Next week is when it's game week, and that's when they'll be focusing on these, 30% of the playbook plays that they've been talking about all camp.
Yeah, absolutely. And man, the bad news is that we're slowly but surely getting weaned off of how much we can relay to the people. The good news is we are very, very close to everyone getting to see for themselves what this team looks like. And, I do believe this offense has capabilities to make big plays. And I think that Drew Lock is going to allow this offense to convert more third downs by the way that he makes plays with his feet and his arms. So I there's a lot of, for lack of a better term, PTSD with the fan base in terms of, oh God, not again. I just don't think it's going to be that bad. I really don't think it's going to be that bad. Even if, it's a little ugly to start the season, I still think that you're going to see plays made and the offense move the ball and get themselves into at least field goal range more than you have the last couple of seasons when those offense really, started to bottom out.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. There's a lot more reason for hope, and I know we had someone in the comment section yesterday saying their excitement for the season went from 100 to 0 because of these last few practices, and I'll say no. Maybe don't have it be at 100 and expecting this team to take off week 1 led by the offense, but don't go all the way down to 0. There's still a lot of good things, and don't forget, they're going up against the number 1 paid defense in the NFL. It shouldn't be easy, because if it was for the offense, then there'd be problems on the other side of the ball.
Yeah, and remember when Case Keenum was dicing people up in training camp and was going weeks without an interception? Well,
He was great.
It didn't reveal much about Case Keenum, but it also, looking back, revealed some weaknesses in the defense that at times in that 2018 season was burnt to a crisp.
Yeah, yep. And that just reminded me that I forgot to make my joke earlier that I said watching Von Miller going against those guys made me crave burnt ends.
And on that burnt end, we'll wrap up today. Ryan, thanks for joining us live from Dove Valley. You, my friend, have a great vacation. We'll talk to you before the season opener, a couple days before the season opener. Get a nice tan, enjoy some delicious drinks, and thanks for checking in with us today. And thank you all for joining us on this live segment of the podcast. Stay tuned for some comments coming at you in just a second.
I'll miss you.
All right. Cool.
Oh, we're back. Hey, you just can't get rid of us yet.
What's up?